Thank you very much. Thanks for providing me with this unique opportunity to interact and share my thoughts. And the subject of today's discussion is going to be looking through the numbers. So the way I have tried to structure the presentation is that I'll broadly cover three areas. The first one is about understanding what is meant by data visualization, mining and analysis. So we'll first try and understand the motivation behind why we are spending this afternoon on data analysis, some of the key trends, and then would also like to show you some existing visualization techniques and how the way we look at the data has helped in taking better decisions and also some of the leading practices around that. I'll be very happy for you to ask me questions because we would want to keep this session as interactive as possible towards the end. And I will try and cover the initial part in the next 1 hour. And please do feel free to keep your questions, and we will discuss that after an hour. So before we start off, first of all, the big question which everybody would need to ask is why at all we are talking about data analysis and data visualization. So there are a couple of perspectives to it. So I'll share a perspective about why are we talking about it so much now. We all know that we are capturing a lot of data about our customers, about the transactions they do with us, about our financials. But somebody can always ask a question, this was always there before, so what's new about it? So the understanding now is that whilst in the earlier days we would do a lot of analysis before a transaction is already is done. So before you actually sell a product, there will be a lot of data which you will gather from the market. You will gather about your customers, you will gather about your product costing, etc. But once a sale is made, then you then kind of move on to something else and really don't have the ability to capture data about how a particular product or service is getting used. What is happening now is that with the advent of new ways of people expressing their opinion in different media, with the advancements in technology about how you are able to store the data, now it is possible to actually capture data about how a particular product and service is getting consumed even after a sale has been made. Now somebody can ask a question, why is it so important? Well, the importance lies in the fact that if we are able to analyze not just the pre-transaction data but also the post-transaction data about our customers, then it becomes that much more easier for us to understand whether a particular product or a service is helping our customers to achieve their outcomes. And if not, then we can do something about it. If we are, then we can raise the game a little and be more competitive. So on one hand, there is a data deluge, which is what the slide is saying, but on the other hand, this is also an opportunity for us to really create a differentiation in the marketplace. And that is why, in my opinion, the focus on not just data collection but data analysis has increased manifold in the last couple of years. If we just take a look at the different types of data, then we can conceptualize it as effectively two types of sources and two types of data. So we can broadly conceptualize the data as either generated internally by way of our own transactions or coming from external sources, and also the data type can be broadly classified as either structured, which is numerical figures, and also unstructured. Now the topic for today's discussion is more on structured data, which is where I will focus, but I just wanted to give a canvas that we are looking at the gamut of entire internal, external, and structured and unstructured for us to generate more insights and then create those insights into a competitive advantage. So today, for today's session, we'll primarily focus on the lower left-hand side box, which is more on the internal and structured, and show some examples. But then the similar concepts are equally applicable for the other boxes. The overall objective being that if you have better knowledge about your stakeholders, about your customers, about your financials, about your costs, then that does translate into a significant amount of competitive advantage for you. Moving on, what is also important is that analysis we do not do for the sake of doing analysis. Analysis needs to result into some actionable insights. So I will give some examples. So for example, if you are really running a promotional campaign for a particular product, and for running that promotional campaign, you need to take a decision as to which particular campaign you should look at. And you can devise a criteria that for running that campaign, I need to have a threshold return on investment. So when we are talking about a return on investment, we are talking about two parameters. The numerator is the return and the denominator is the investment. Now when we are talking about the return, we need to define that if I am running a marketing campaign, what is the return I should be expecting. Now the return could be something like a sales lift. So for example, if you did provide a particular promotional scheme, then you would expect that in addition to your secular demand, what has been the delta increase in the sales of that particular product or that particular SKU in that market. That would be defined as a return, right? And the investment will be the additional cost which you will incur either by way of the direct costs, because there is a deduction in the price or the realized value, or by way of some indirect costs by way of marketing and other investments which need to be made for that specific promotional campaign. Now the starting point of deriving an actionable insight is to be very clear and precise about the definitions. So in this particular case, if we very clearly define what we mean by return and what exactly we mean by investment, then it becomes very clear what that particular metric means to us. So this is one of the fundamental tenets of analyzing a structured data, where it is very important that we clearly understand unambiguously what is the definition we are talking about. Okay. Now this might seem a very obvious statement, but let me introduce a little more complexity in the same example. So for example, if we are talking about returns, now a very simplistic definition could be that I am looking at what has been my lift, sales lift, right? Now I also know that when I run a promotional campaign for one of my SKUs or products, it might be possible that another product which is also very closely related, the sales of that product might go down. So there could be a cannibalization factor which can come into play. Now if I introduce this complexity, then I would also need to consider that fine, I could increase my sales of my chosen product, but has there been a drop of sales of any other related product? And if that is the case, then I need to factor that in and reduce my returns to that extent. So then my returns would not just be a positive delta for my product, it could also be a negative delta for my other product which competes closely in that for that segment. Then I am actually refining the meaning of what I mean by return. Another complexity if I want to introduce, so for example, if I am running a promotional campaign, then there could be a tendency that because for the duration of a promotional campaign, my customers might overstock a particular product. and they are overstocking because they know that they are getting it at a good price and they might be able to sell it off later. There is no real increase in the demand because of my promotional campaign. It is actually more an opportunistic behavior by a particular customer or a group of customers. So what I would expect is, after I complete or end that campaign, my demand for that product might actually significantly go down in the intervening, in the next period, next cycle, simply because my customers have preponed their demand of the next period for this period. So in that case, my true cost or my true return is actually much lower than what I'm expecting just by way of sales lift. So you can see that by introducing a little more complexity into a very simple definition, I'm just making sure that the definition which I use has a very clear understanding, and also I'm looking at the multiple aspects of the return and the investment before I can really compute the ROI figure. So that's where I wanted to really focus on the real call out of these slides. The other example which I can bring is that for example, if you are looking at managing the churn of your customers, so one good way to find that out is if you can build a model and you can predict if your customers are going to leave your product or use your competition. But then that analysis by itself is not going to help until and unless you are able to link that analysis to your CRM system or to your Salesforce, so that they can proactively go out and reach those high-risk customers who we think would actually leave us and join our competition. So what is very important then is how actionable that piece of information is. So this is where we make a distinction between a very hard analytics and a soft analytics. So the hard part of it is actually doing the prediction of the churn, and the softer aspect is that putting that information back into a process and closing the feedback so that we are able to take some actions on it and derive some benefit out of the analysis which has been obtained. So, so the second call out here is that we need to very clearly define a plan of action, or almost like a standard operating procedure, in terms of what is it that an organization needs to do after an piece of analysis has been done, so that it doesn't only remain a theoretical exercise, but it actually helps in achieving some end objectives. There was a survey which was done by PwC. We call it the annual Global CEO Survey. We do that almost every year. So the last survey which we did for all the CEOs, one very interesting observation which we saw was that nearly one-third, a shade under the one-third of the CEOs actually consider use and management of data and analytics as an essential and urgent step for their organization's robust transition into the future. And I think this is a very powerful statement, because we are saying that this is no longer just something which is in the realm of a CIO or a CFO or a COO. In fact, one-third of this, no less than the CEOs, are actually very, very seriously thinking about using data and analytics to significantly up the game and transition into a future where they will be able to be more responsive to their customers, they will be able to better in control of their stakeholders, and they can create a sustainable competitive advantage in the long run. So this is something which is a very heartening observation on one hand, but on the other hand it also means that there is a very high level of expectation within every organization where people might think that just by data and analytics would be the cure-all or panacea of all problems, whilst on one hand the awareness is very good to start such initiatives, on the other hand, it is also important that a step-by-step approach is taken so that any organization does not start expecting a lot more in the initial stages and then it kind of loses the steam. So wanted to share this data analysis as a source of competitive advantage. So this is a little more about a number of techniques which needs to be used, particularly in the decision-making context. Now, for the purposes of today's presentation, we will focus a lot on the operational data, on the internal data. But what is very important is that there is a lot of data which is getting captured, not exactly in a very structured format, all over the place, and it's a very rich source of information for any organization to tap into and do analysis. So some of the case studies or use cases. So let me explain what is the meaning of a use case. So in many cases, in many situations, people do analysis for doing a piece of analysis. However, a more scientific approach would be to use analysis for the purpose of solving a problem. That problem statement is what we define as a use case. It is very important that before any analysis is done, we are very clear about the business context and we are very sure about why is it that we want to undertake an exercise in doing analysis or analytics. So these are some examples of potential use cases or questions which people from the lines of business may have. And once these questions or use cases are robustly defined, then it becomes much easier to use or take the data and see whether we can get an insight to this question based on whatever internal and external data which has been captured. So I'll just take an example. The first question here talks about, are we in the right market segment? So one example I can take, particularly from the perspective of a telecom services provider. So a good question would be that if I divide my market into voice related services and into data related services broadly, then which market should I focus more on? And then you start looking at the profitability or the size of the market in both these segments. And to start that, you may want to look at how many customers today you are offering voice related services, and what has been the trend in the past in terms of your customer segment, and is there a trend which is falling or is rising? And juxtapose that trend in the context of what is happening in the market. More importantly, what would be the future profitability of that segment? Is it going to go down because the call rates are going to go down? Is it going to go down because the churn rate of a particular customer using a voice service might actually be very high? So those factors need to be looked at. And then what is very important is to profile or figure out the behaviors of the customers per se. So there would be maybe more than 10 million or even more, 20 million customers. Now it is not really possible that you try and analyze each and every customer one after the other, but what is possible is that you can classify or stratify your customer based on certain parameters, and these parameters could be the psychographic parameters which are related to the attributes of the customer, like the age, the income bracket, the gender, the location, and other factors which are very specific to the customer. Or it could be more behavioral inputs or trends which could be in the form of what has been the usage of the person, whether he pays his bills on time or her bills in time, etc. And if you combine the psychographic and the behavioral uh, characteristics of your customers, then can you use analytics to stratify your customers into different segments and also figure out what kind of services or products they are using, and is there then an opportunity to either do a cross-sell. So somebody who is only using voice, can we cross-sell data, or do an upsell? So if somebody is already using say data services, then is it possible that we can sell some more in that space and effectively increase the average revenue per user? So you can see that just with a very simple innocuous question like are we in the right market segment can lead to multiple layers of questions, and each of these layers of questions would then in effect lead to a particular mini use case or a sub use case, which can then be used to start an investigation on the data and then figure out if we can throw some insights. Now this is a slightly different approach than just looking at the data and finding an analysis. It is a more guided approach where we already have an end objective in our mind, and then all our analysis is geared towards either achieving that end objective, either proving or disproving the hypothesis which we have created. I think that is something which is very fundamental to the process of how we would like to do the analysis of the data. This is just a very schematic view of how the different factors of a competitive strategy can be enabled using analytics. So I have been talking a lot about customers, and which we all know is very important. But then that is not the only lever an organization has in terms of attaining success in the marketplace. It is also important how it manages the ecosystem of its suppliers, about the new substitutes or new entrants into the market, and also the existing competition which is already there. So there are different techniques and there are different ways by which you can look at a holistic view of the entire ecosystem across the multiple stakeholders, so that it can be a very well formulated strategy, and your use cases are all geared towards ensuring that you are able to derive long-term competitive advantage. This is something which will be very, very interesting for somebody like a CEO or a COO, and this is the language we probably need to talk when we are actually talking about analytics or data analysis or data visualization. So anything which helps in any of these 5 levers is something which a senior management of any organization would be very interested in. Just wanted to clarify some of the terms which we are using. Now some of this might be fairly straightforward, but it is also important that we understand the different nuances of what kind of analytics we are talking about. So if you look at from a maturity continuum, the first level of maturity comes is what we call as describing what the data is telling. So sometimes when the data comes to us, it comes to us in a format which is very difficult to understand. So if it comes in the form of a log file, or if it comes to us in the form of a very long table with lots of rows and columns, then it becomes very difficult for us to analyze, because our human brain cannot really process so much of information in a short span of time. So the first endeavor or emphasis on analysis is, can we make it simple in terms of describing what the situation is, which comes under the realm of what we call as descriptive analytics. So for here we would be looking at some very simple things, like we might say what is the trend of a particular metric, who are my top 10 or bottom 10 customers, where am I incurring most of my costs? Is it possible that some of my products are correlated? So, for example, if I look at the sales trend of my products which I am selling, and if I see that there is just a very simple correlation between the two, does it mean that these products, if they are bundled together, can actually sell more, or it is just a coincidence? So the descriptive analytics all talks about what is already happening or what has actually happened. So it is giving you information about the present and the past, and it is just presenting that information in an easy to consume manner in the way by way of better visualization techniques, which I will come to a little later. Once you have been able to understand what is happening, the next question which comes to our mind is, why is something happening like that? Okay, so then it becomes important to diagnose if there is a problem. So for example, if you have seen that there is a sales drop, or there is a cost increase, or there is any other factor which is worrying, or there is an exception which has happened, then what is the reason that exception has happened? Now, one of the ways by which you can figure out what the exception has happened is just by your gut feel, because as a person running an organization, you may have years and years of experience in terms of identifying a particular problem situation, and just by looking at the data, you might be able to immediately come to the conclusion that there is a problem which has happened. So if that is the case, it's a very simple exercise. You don't need a lot of sophisticated analytics. But if that is not the case, then there would be a set of techniques available to you where you can look at either patterns of the data. You can look at more detailed data of the same, and you can do some modeling so that you can understand the cause of a particular outcome. So this is really where you are putting the business context in terms of building a model which explains the causality of why certain things have happened, which we actually call as the diagnostic analytics. So here the important thing is we are still looking at the historical data, but we are trying to look at the historical data to understand the reason for a particular event or a behavior so that we can take corrective actions in the future. So both descriptive and diagnostic will talk about present and historical data. However, in the next level of maturity, we are actually taking a little bit of a bold step, and we are saying that fine, this is what I have seen as my sales trend. Can I now do a better job of predicting my future? So this whole concept of being able to forecast or predict something in the future is something which is very important because we really want to be governed by the leading indicators so that we can plan it out. Now every organization, this is not a very new concept, every organization goes through an annual planning cycle, and one of the key components of an annual planning cycle is the ability to do proper forecasting and proper budgeting for the next year or for the next 5 years, depending on the time frame of the planning cycle. Now typically many organizations would actually consider past as an extension, the past data, and extend the past data into the future by way of very simple linear techniques, and then use that as the forecast figures for the next year or for the next couple of years and all that. But there are very easily available techniques which are available to us, which can very easily improve our ability to do accurate forecasting or accurate predicting of the lead indicators. And this becomes important so that you have a better handle on the plan numbers for the next year. You have a better handle on the variance, controlling the variance between the plan and the actual, and more importantly, you understand and you allocate your resources in the right way so that you can achieve better outcome. In fact, if you are able to predict better than your competition, either about your customers or about your cost or about your sales or about your employee attrition, then you are already a step ahead in the game, and you can really use that to derive significant advantage in a competitive scenario. In addition to predictive, now we are coming to a little more sophisticated analytics, which is telling that how can we embed the result of analytics as part of a process. So let me explain what we mean by that. So it's almost like a playbook or a rule book, which we all have seen, where somebody has to just go by that rule book and follow it from beginning to end, and then the job is done. So for example, if we are talking about, say, a retail store, we know that the store manager on a day-to-day basis has to take a lot of decisions. He or she has to take decisions about what to buy, on the buying side, what to buy, how much to buy, at what price to buy, and where to stock, so that he or she can maximize the sales of that store. And this is a decision which the person would have to take on a regular basis. Because stocks will get depleted, they will have to be refilled, there will be a demand for new products, customers might ask for new things, better things. There could be a competitive store which might have been opened in the near vicinity, which would require this store to also realign in its product assortment. Now these decisions which need to be taken, can it be made a little more systematic? So for example, if the store manager has got a playbook, and that playbook is nothing but a set of analytics which gives information about what has been the trend of a particular product or an SKU in the last few days or few months, and prediction of the future demand in the next 1 week or next 2 weeks. And based on that, the model or the analytics can actually suggest that it is much better to stock A rather than B, and this is the quantity you should stock, right? So a model can be built which is prescriptive in nature in terms of telling what needs to be done. Of course, it is important that a degree of flexibility needs to be provided to the individual who is taking a decision. You cannot always say that just completely go by the logic of what the model or the tool is telling. The person can actually have the ability to override what is coming from the system directly, and in some cases people do that. But even if you do that, you can actually track it and use it either to increase the accuracy of your analytical model, or to bring about a change management in your organization about being more positive about using prescriptive analytics. So this is where it is going, where at least 70 to 80% of the decisions which people would have to take, can it be done in a semi-automated or an automated way, and it gets fed into the system directly, and you're always optimized because you would have institutionalized that human knowledge into the system. We did talk about the data. I thought I will just very quickly talk about a new term which has become very popular nowadays, which is big data, and this is where we have to be cognizant of the fact that the data, we cannot really now ignore the volumes of the data. I just read somewhere that we are probably increasing the size of our entire database all over the place by significant amount of times. It's beyond the human ability to even think how much of data we are storing and generating. So there is a huge volume of data, and when I say huge volume of data, I'm not just talking about millions or billions. I'm actually talking about billions of billions, which is more around the quintillion range almost like 10 power 18 order of magnitude in terms of storage of data. The second aspect is the speed at which the data is coming and the speed at which the data needs to be analyzed. So we know that there are various industries like financial services, like telecom, like retail, where the huge volume of data also gets captured very, very fast. And in order to really ensure that you are able to respond, decisions have to be taken very quickly. So the velocity or the speed becomes an important aspect of any analysis which needs to be taken into cognizant. The third aspect is more from the perspective that we are not just talking about data coming in only from your internal systems or ERP systems. We are actually talking about data coming in from a large variety of external systems, data coming in from multiple formats, which may not necessarily be just the written format. It could also be the video format, or it could also be the audio format. So we are actually talking about a very complex variety of data, which gives a very rich source of information. And then the fourth, last but not the least, is the credibility of the data in terms of the target audience, which is very important. So I thought I'll just put in the perspective that there would be a need, as any organization gets into the maturity continuum, to handle, if not for at least 2 or 3 aspects in terms of volume, velocity and variety, to take full advantage of the richness of information which is getting stored. These are some of the benefits from proper visualization, mining and analysis of data. And this also goes back to my earlier slide, where I talked about having a very specific use case. Now here I'm extending the concept of a use case to the next level, which is more around realizing a particular benefit based on any exercise. So primarily the benefits will be around 3 aspects. The first one will be whether it helps in improving the sales or improving the top line, which is more on the growth side, where you can sell to more customers, sell at a higher cost, do a cross-sell and upsell, do a proper campaign management, have more loyal customers, reduce customer churn. These are all examples of how you will be able to increase your revenue or your business through analytics. That is the first thing. The second thing will of course be reduction, ability to reduce the cost, and there would be some case studies and use cases, particularly for industries where there is a huge capital investment in large infrastructure, large plants or large machineries or large assets, high value assets. There is always a scope of improving the productivity of these assets so that it can help in reducing the cost per unit of the manufactured product. The other aspect will be around the entire supply chain and distribution optimization, where on one hand you don't have stockouts, on the other hand you reduce the amount of slow moving goods so that you reduce the inventory costs. The third aspect would be the entire procurement of function, whether it's a direct or an indirect sourcing, and in all these cases ability to discover the right price, ability to have a single view of the supplier, which will help in driving cost advantages, is something which is always a very low-hanging fruit from an organization perspective. So that's the second aspect. The third aspect is around management of risks, which is particularly very relevant for industries which are very tightly governed, particularly the financial services sector, particularly the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector, where you need to be compliant and you need to ensure that either your NPAs are not going up or your compliance related to particular statutes or law is being managed. So that's something which becomes very important. Management of risk, both an evaluation and the management of risk becomes very important from a data analysis perspective. So you can actually have your entire use case built around these three concepts of revenue, cost, and risk, and then use that framework to drive initiatives so that your end result of doing this analysis is beneficial to the organization. There is a methodology slide. I will try to go very quickly because this is something which is obvious, so that I can come back to the visualization piece. So this is fairly straightforward. You extract, you categorize, summarize, and then you make the data available. Fairly straightforward. What is important is that you have a proper methodology. So do the planning, and then design and selecting, and finally operate and evolve. Because what is very important is that when you are doing any analytics project, you are not when you're doing an analytics project, you are constantly using the way to figure out that you're able to figure out that we can continuously evolve the model. That is very important. We did talk about embedding analytics in organizations. So this is more from the prescriptive side, where we can actually put it as part of a business process, as part of a workflow. So what you can actually do is that decisions which need to be taken can actually be moved as part of a workflow. So for example, if you're approving a particular vendor, or you are probably making a transaction, then you can actually go through a set of reports or set of analysis and form an opinion before you can actually take a decision. So it can be governed as part of a workflow. So this will have two benefits. One is that all the investments we are making in analytics will actually be used by the organization, and second is it would give a very direct feedback as to the efficacy of whether the analysis which has been provided is actually helping the business users to take the right decisions. A simple case where you can actually embed analytics in an organization. So it starts out very simply with acquisition of the data. Then the next step is around the classification, the modeling, the analysis of the data itself, and then finally it comes in terms of the day-to-day decisions in terms of how the data needs to be used. So I would now talk a little bit about some use cases which will give you a visual picture. Now this particular slide which is there in front of you is a very simple slide. What you can see here are in the x-axis is the different types of products, and it gives a very simple view of what is being your percentage of spend on a particular product, and what has been the percentage of transactions and number of vendors. So the context here is you are looking at your vendor count, your transaction count with your vendors, and you're looking at the spend cost, or how much you have actually spent on that particular vendor. Now the one which is in the green line gives you the number of vendors. So where I have pointed my arrow, you can look at that point and you can see that the number of vendors is very high. However, both your number of transactions, which is the blue bar here, is very low, and also your amount of spend is also very low. So the obvious question you would want to ask is, why is it that your number of vendors for that particular SKU or that particular product is so very high? And this simple visual technique, where you are only looking at nothing but a simple linear, simple representation of the different KPIs in one screen helps you to take some, ask some very searching questions which can help you to improve the efficiency of your entire procurement process. More on the procurement, I wanted to take one more example. So this is again a very simple visualization technique where on the x-axis you have a per unit price of a particular product, and on the y-axis you have the quantity which has been purchased, and you would see that there are some blue diamond shaped objects which effectively refer to a particular product, and then you have a pink colored rectangle, and you have got a green colored triangle. So each of these different icons represent a particular type of product which you are purchasing. Now this particular graph shows some very interesting observations. What it is telling is that the first thing what it is telling you is that you have a very wide range for the same item. So the per unit price keeps varying a lot. It varies from as low as 4.5 to as high as 7.5. So that itself should be a cause of worry if for buying the same product from different vendors. So if the same product you are buying from different vendors, so vendor A, B, C and D. So 4 vendors are there and you are buying the same products and you are buying it at different rates. That itself should be a cause of worry. The second cause of worry, just by looking at this visualization screen, is that whilst you can understand that the per unit price will go down if your quantity is low, or sorry, quantity is high, it's very difficult to understand why the per unit price will be high even if your quantity is actually quite low. So for example, if you look at where I'm pointing, the per unit quantity, per unit price is very low, which is 4.5, and the quantity is very high. And if you look at this, then you can see that yes, whilst the price has gone significantly up, but the quantity has actually gone down, which you can explain. But what is very difficult to understand is that why you would have a situation where you are actually buying a large quantity from this particular supplier at a significantly higher cost than this one. So some of these simple questions can be just asked if you have the right combination of x and y axis and right combination of matrices. And this is something which is very difficult to understand if you only look at a tabular data. It is only possible to understand very clearly if you have a slightly visual way of representing a data. So my entire intention of showing you these 2 examples was to tell you that very simple visualization techniques can help in asking very searching questions. This is an interesting piece of example which I thought I will share with you again on the visualization, which is what I call as a tornado chart. Now what it effectively does is that it calculates the sensitivity of a particular parameter on, say, an outcome which could be a profitability or an EBITDA. So, so there is a linear model or a semi-linear model which is behind the scene, and that model actually calculates that with a plus minus 1% increase in the material cost of a particular commodity, what is the impact of that in terms of the per unit contribution to a particular product. Now this is a very simple analysis which we are doing, no rocket science about it, but this actually helps you in understanding what are the drivers of the cost or what are the drivers of your profitability for a particular product which you need to be very careful about. And when you are doing driver-based financial planning, then you have to be extra careful with the accuracy of those drivers, which have a very high impact from a sensitivity perspective on the outcome of a measure which is very important for you. I also wanted to show you a dashboard which actually looks a little complicated, but I will explain to you the simplest. It's not really very complicated, so I will explain to you what it actually does. Now this is a dashboard which provides a lot of matrices in a very visual way. So for example, if you have got matrices on the left hand side, which is say revenue or expenses or profits, then what it does is that against every such metric, it also shows what has been the trend. So if I select a different metric, I can actually see the trend line changing on the right hand side upper corner. Similarly, if I look at this, it gives me a different trend. So even before I look into a particular metric, I have got a visual clue about whether I can see some peaks or troughs very visually about that metric. And then once I have looked at that, then I can actually go and understand what are the 10 best things I am doing and the 10 worst things, what has been the impact on my revenue and customer satisfaction for that selected area, and what are my different sources of information which I can look at. So this particular dashboard gives an ability to link related KPIs together, gives a visual representation of what each of these KPIs is telling, and also helps us to drill down into a particular KPI and investigate in a little more detail. Similarly, the next one I wanted to show you was a slightly different view. Whilst the previous screen was more in terms of looking at the historical data and looking at the trends or patterns, this particular visualization is more in terms of doing the future planning. So you might be having a number of levers which will impact the revenue, the cost, and the profitability. So those levers can all be specified on the right hand side of the screen, and for each of these levers you can actually change and play around with the levers and see the impact of the change in the profitability and the cost at runtime. So what I'm effectively doing is I'm changing one of the levers and I'm seeing a combination of the changes of these levers into my overall profitability of my numbers. So this is what we call as a what if planning or a scenario planning dashboard. And what is very interesting is that once you have built these scenarios, you can actually save it and version it and then use it for future references, so that you can then take an appropriate action against any difference between the actual and the variance. Finally, there are some case studies which are also there. So this is a very simple case study where you can do a demand prediction using a set of models, forecasting models, and using some what-if analysis. You can do a campaign management planning for an organization where you look at the customer's past characteristics and use that for building a model which helps in predicting the propensity of a response of a particular discount which can be given. Similarly, you can figure out based on affinity of a set of products whether an association is there for a number of products which can be sold together, because this can be very easily used for both cross-selling and upselling, and also influencing in the sales promotions. You can also do and fine-tune the segmentation of your customers based on a model which can be built on the basis of the recency of purchase, the frequency, and the monetary value of spend. And you can use that to actually devise the different categories of your customers. So you can define your customers as very high value customers to low value customers, and focus on that particular value which you think would be very beneficial for a particular product. And that's how I would just like to end the session, because conscious of the time that we have just completed an hour. I would just take a pause now and look forward to hearing from you the different questions you may have on the presentation today.
These are the questions to them. Yeah, it's unmuted.
Okay, so the first question is by Vinod Krishnan. And the question is that, can I get a copy of the slideshow after the webinar? The answer is yes. The session is also recorded. The copy of the slideshow is also there, so that will be made available to you. The second question is from Raju V. What is the dashboard tool that you are using in the demo? Raju, there are a number of tools available in the market, and I used a combination of Tableau and Excel sheets, but there are many tools available, and you can use any one of them. They're pretty good. They have a very clear understanding of the analysis you are trying to derive. Some of the analysis require very less of sophistication from a tool perspective, but actually a lot more sophistication from a thinking and from a data perspective. So, that is where my take would be from a tool. The next question is